Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy is Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. And John, you wrote about the Chicago Police Department report that was issued by Tiny Dancer Star Chamber last week. Over the weekend, and reverberations are still being felt by that report. I think they're going to be felt for a long time to come because it accused the department of systemic racism. It accused the department, which includes some 6,000 African American and Latino officers, of being indifferent to the sanctity of life of minorities in the city of Chicago.
If I were a black officer going back to my old neighborhood, I'd probably be. You'd have to have a police board watching me 24/7 because I just pity. I feel for those officers trying to protect their old neighborhoods.
You know what's interesting
It doesn't. Boards and commissions don't do it. Sometimes hands-on criminals do it.
Well, and you know what's interesting is if you think about painting with a broad brush, a couple of Fridays ago when the Chicago Teachers Union and all of their socialist allies held that big rally downtown, there was an African-American woman who got on the stage, and I was there. I witnessed it. A teacher, private school teacher, got up on stage, said, I'm an angry black woman. She repeated that several times, and then she repeated, F the police. F the police, F the police. Now, should we take that as that's representative of all teachers, of all African-American female teachers?
Christian McQuarrie had a good column on that last week.
Right, and the response, of course, is, of course we shouldn't. No, that's silly. But because you have some bad actors in the Chicago Police Department, and there's no question you have presently and over the years, we should say all 12,000 officers are co-conspirators in a system designed to be indifferent to minority lives. That's essentially what the reports concluded.
They're risking their lives every day, going into bad neighborhoods, trying to save people. Sometimes criminals don't like getting arrested. Sometimes they get knocked around. Sometimes they don't deserve it. Sometimes they do. That's the bottom line of how things really work in the real world. And to divorce, to separate racism out and divorce it from, and there has been, and there is.
Of course.
But to support that from the political corruption of Chicago, the politics of tribes, and now the news story about the top brass, African-American, allegedly using influence to help their wives and girlfriends score high on the lieutenant's exam. I don't know if that's really fair politics. It's just politics.
Well, let's get a law enforcement perspective on this, someone who speaks in unvarnished lingo when it comes to these matters. He is friend of the show and Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. Sheriff Clarke, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, John, it's my pleasure. Good morning to you. Good morning to your listeners. Look, if Rahm Emanuel believes what's in this fraud report, then he alone is responsible for it, and he should resign immediately. Accountability starts at the top. His reign as mayor of the great city of Chicago has been a train wreck. His reign over the Chicago Police Department and the handling of the Laquan McDonald case has been a train wreck. Emanuel is an embattled mayor right now. He's under fire, and instead of accepting responsibility for his failure of leadership, he throws the fine men and women of the Chicago Police Department overboard to save his political backside.
Sure.
He's trying to distance himself from this by slapping together this hodgepodge of mainly, not all, mainly anti-police agenda-driven groups to blame the police. But look, his fingerprints are all over this. This report is politically motivated and fundamentally flawed. It starts out with a predetermined conclusion that the entire Chicago Police Department is racist. This is nothing more than a continuation of the war on police. And then they went about using nothing more. I read the executive summary. I have it in my hand. It uses nothing more than emotional and anecdotal claims to prove it. There's absolutely no evidence contained in this report to support these slanderous claims. This report it misuses data. It manipulates statistics. What research methodology did they use to put this together? I've done graduate level research. This report is junk.
I would agree with you that it's a political argument, and I said so in my weekend column, Sheriff, but you've been in law enforcement a long time.
38 years.
Are you telling me, and you're African-American, correct? So are you telling me that you didn't encounter police racism when you were a rookie starting out on the job?
No, I didn't. And for anybody to just throw this claim out
You
there.
did not?
No, I didn't. And for anybody to, I think I was clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
For anybody to just throw this out there, it's like throwing spaghetti up against a wall, all right? That's a slanderous claim for someone to say, yeah, police officers are racist. And you know what? There's racism through every demographic and every discipline and every work type in America. Sometimes it's part of the human condition, okay? But if you're asking me that the men and women that I worked with at street level and I work with today come in with malice in their heart, with racist intent to go about doing their daily duty, is wrong. I will not stand for it. Are police officers imperfect? Sure, because it's part of the human condition. But when this stuff happens, we and me as a law enforcement executive, it is my job to root these people who don't believe in this, don't belong in this profession, out of this profession, and not have the entire profession or an entire police department, like the fine men and women of the Chicago Police Department, to have their integrity, their character, their service, their sacrifice maligned because of an aberration like Laquan McDonald. Nobody, I should say nobody, correct myself there. Very few would justify what happened and from what we saw, but I don't know all the evidence in that case. But to think that we need to fundamentally change the way we police in America because of Mike Brown, because of Eric Garner, because of Freddie Gray, because of Laquan McDonald is wrong. That would be like trying to fundamentally change the medical community because of a botched surgical procedure. You don't do that. You fix that situation there, and you leave the rest of it alone. This is going to be a disaster for the city of Chicago if any of these recommendations are implemented. You know who will pay the highest toll? Good, law-abiding black people in the Chicago ghetto.
You know what's that's interesting, Sheriff Clarke, is that it's very difficult to find somebody who will speak with moral clarity, who, even though they feel the same way that you do about this report here in Chicago. We had Dean Angelo, who's the president of the FOP in Chicago, on, and he certainly went after the report, making some of the points you did in more muted tones. And I've talked to friends of mine that are Chicago Police Department officers and administrators, and they feel the same way. But it's a political culture where people are afraid to speak out as well. And I wonder, when you talk to law enforcement around the country, if you find that to be the case, or if maybe this is something that's particular to Chicago.
No, it's not particular to Chicago, which is why I'm sticking my nose into what's going on down there. It's only 80 miles up the road, by the way, or down the road, I should say. But look, this is an assault on the profession of policing, which is why I do have something to say about what's going on in Chicago. They're not just trying to fundamentally change the Chicago Police Department, but they're trying to do it all across America. This is going to have disastrous results. It's going to get citizens killed. It's going to get police officers unnecessarily injured and killed because of it. You have people who have never done this job a day in their life trying to fix it. That's why I use the medical community analogy. I don't know anything about the medical community. Why would somebody put me on a task force to change the medical community? I'm not educated on the subject of medical science. I've never done it. It would be inane to have something like this. If we want to have a discussion, and I'm all for this, about some things that are bothering the community in terms of how you police in the ghetto, first of all, it would give us a chance to explain why we have to do some of the things we do. A lot of this is based on the fact that many people who don't like the way we have to police the ghetto, by the way, it's because you don't have enough informal social controls in the ghetto. You have all these pathologies that require assertive policing. Maybe they'd have a better understanding. We could hear their concerns, and maybe we could make some adjustments, not a total transformation of this profession. This is wrong. I'm going to continue to push back on this.
Sheriff, I don't mean to interrupt, but Sheriff Clarke, so in Chicago, investigative stops year over year are down 90%. 100,000 plus fewer stops this year as of April 15th than last year, which is just a staggering number. And you hear, you've got police that are gun shy, but then you hear from residents that say, well, wait a second. One of the arguments that's made, wait a second, if police aren't willing to do their job, then that's a problem too, and that's on police. What do you say to that?
Yeah, see, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's pick your poison. When we do policing that's effective, reasonable, and constitutional, certain groups, I'm not blaming everybody in the city of Chicago. I wouldn't do that in any city in America. Then they don't like it. Then when they get what they ask for, this inane idea of no-go zones, stop all of this racist stop, these traffic stops, then they say, oh, they're not doing their job and they need to be gotten rid of. I'll tell you what, if these blowhards think this is so easy, then they ought to come out here and try it. Like I said, the reason why we have to have so much assertive policing, not just in the Chicago ghetto, but in the Milwaukee ghetto, the New York, the Ferguson ghetto, the Baltimore ghetto, is because you don't have informal social controls that keep crime and violence in check, like effective parenting, all right? The fact that you have inescapable poverty. Poverty's become a lifestyle. That's Rahm Emanuel's fault because he hasn't found any remedies for that. You have failing K-12 public education. That's an informal social control. Schools, right? Failing schools. That's Rahm Emanuel's fault. You have massive unemployment with brown and black people, not only in the city of Chicago, all across America. Rahm Emanuel, as mayor, is supposed to come up with remedies to make sure people can find meaningful work. Meaningful work is an informal social control that will give idle people less time to engage in crime and violence. When you look at all these pathologies and the fact that Rahm Emanuel has no answer for these pathologies, it's easy to just throw the police under the bus and blame the police. That's what's going on here. That's the political motivation.
He is Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke with an idea that about 70% of the city could get around Rahm Emanuel resigning. Sheriff Clarke, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time as always.
It's always my pleasure. Enjoy your day.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.